All right. Well, hello everyone. We are just waiting a little bit for people to come in. And I think we can start. We anyway have a quick intro now, so people can join. And again, hello everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in today. My name is Susanne. I am the co-founder and CEO of Citruslabs, and Citruslabs is the fastest growing provider of clinical trials for brands. So, in case you're interested in conducting clinical trials or perception studies for your brand, feel free to contact us. And I am joined today by Bethany Schongarth, the marketing manager at Citruslabs, and Jake Ribbe, the founder and CEO of CPG Fusion. And we are very excited to talk about everything you need to know before launching your wellness product. And we'll talk about how to pick out your ingredients, manufacturing pitfalls, FTC and FDA regulations and compliance. We will also talk about marketing and branding, the do's and don'ts, and the basics of product claims, why they matter, and how to create a compelling story with your claims that resonate with your audience and build trust. And some quick housekeeping. Please put any questions you have into the Q&A box or in the chat. Okay, well, Bethany and Jake, I'm really excited to have you here with us today. And before we get into the nitty-gritty of manufacturing and brand marketing and product claims, could you quickly introduce yourselves and tell us who you are and what you do? And let's quickly start with Bethany.
Hey, I'm Bethany. I'm the marketing manager here at Citruslabs, and I do all different kinds of things in marketing. However, this side of marketing is one of my favorite sides where I get to connect with our consumer brands and give them advice and information on how to share their claims, how best to communicate their scientific results that they get at the end of the study. So I'm very excited to share some tips and tricks here in this presentation today.
Awesome. And what about you, Jake?
Hi everyone. My name's Jake. I'm the founder of CPG Fusion, and we help with ingredient sourcing and contract manufacturing. We also have a list of clinically backed ingredients and provide, consulting work as well for supply chains.
Fantastic. And Jake, let's continue with you. At the heart of what you do is manufacturing. And at Citruslabs, we work with a lot of brands. And one thing that I keep hearing over and over again is issues with the manufacturer. And could you give us a crash course on what brands need to know about manufacturing and common pitfalls that we should all avoid?
Sure. Yeah, so I think when you're working with a contract manufacturer, you have to treat them like they're your business partner, making good relationships with co-packers, doing everything that you can to be as prepared as possible and providing as much detailed information to your co-packers so that they can, you know, so you can set realistic expectations for what they need to do and what you need to be able to provide. Um, yeah, so I think that being able to go and visit your co-packer, meet them in person, sit down with them, understand their challenges, what they go through, what the full manufacturing process looks like from what they do from when ingredients come in, whether you know, they're testing all the ingredients when they come in, and then it goes through the manufacturing process, and then what kind of testing do they do on the final product labels, product label claim testing. So I think it's really important to go and visit them, learn their processes, learn what they do, and understand their challenges so that you can help, you know, guide them and help them with, like, for example, there's like if you had a probiotic and if you came into there knowing that it's going to be 52 weeks before that probiotic it reaches their facility, you can go in and set realistic expectations for lead time so that you're not upset later when, the co-packer says 8 weeks and, they didn't
Hmm.
necessarily communicate the fact that a probiotic will take longer than any other ingredient to source. So I think, one is being able to build your knowledge and build your partnerships with your co-packers and, helping them with their challenges and understanding their challenges as well is very important. I think it's important to do, I mentioned as much research as possible, join trade associations if you can, or subscribe to their emails, walk a supply side West show, Expo East. Well, I don't think they have any Expo East anymore, but Expo West, network with other people in the space, ask your co-packer, questions. Most likely they've been around for a long time and they have a lot of connections that you can take advantage of. Um, I think it's really important to, a lot of people won't, I call it mapping your product. So I have this cool little Excel sheet that I can send over to people if they send me an email, but you can essentially take every single ingredient in your formula, you know, price it out, go and reach out to vendors, look at NSF certified. NSF has a section on their website where they have a list of all the different certified, whether it's distributors or co-packers. Go and do your research on ingredients and see who the players are so that you can request pricing, map it out on a product sheet, and you'll have a really good idea of what your biggest cost drivers are on in that formula so that you can have better conversations with your co-packer. So I think it's just, really building your background knowledge of the space, of ingredients, how they're made, who they're coming from, compiling all that information so that when you want to make a product, you have as much information ready to go, and it's a really smooth transition when you're talking to co-packers. So I think when people have issues, there's a lot of, co-packers can be extremely slow. We all have probably dealt with that in some way, shape, or form if you're sourcing or if you're manufacturing a product. So I think if you can try and mitigate that as much as possible, sometimes it's the co-packer, sometimes it's the ingredients, but doing your due diligence and visiting the facilities and um, researching the ingredients and understanding, is it my ingredient that's taking a very long time, or is it the co-packer who is just so slammed, or they have a big massive client that, and you're the smaller client that comes in and wants line time. So I think understanding where they're coming from, what kind of co-packer you're dealing with, is it a smaller 30, 40 employee company with a couple end cap machines, or is it a massive 500,000 square foot company where they're changing sales reps repeatedly and the VP stay. So I think just really understanding co-packers, where they come from, where they are in their life cycle, can really mitigate a lot of issues that a brand might have.
And so you already talked a little bit about how, to select the manufacturer in the first place. So it's, go to trade shows like Expo West, talk to people, visit facilities. What else should we do to actually select the best possible manufacturer for us?
Yeah, I think certifications are a good place to start. What kind of certifications do they have? Are they GMP certified? Do they, and GMP certs are different. An NSF certification holds a lot more weight than maybe some independent consulting company who came in and did a quick little audit and, okay, looked at their SOPs and, okay, you're GMP certified. So I think the certifications go far. The testing that they do, and not only the testing, but what kind of labs are they using? If FDA, for example, FDA releases warning letters, so that's public information. So if you ask for their third party labs that they use, you can research their labs and see if, oh, this lab got in trouble for, I think it's called dry labbing, where they don't even actually test the samples and they just issue CFAs. The type of testing that they're doing for the products that they have is very important. If they're just doing um, FTIR on a finished good, is that necessarily the right testing for that ingredient, or are they using, HPLC, which is a lot more accurate? So I think looking at who their partners are, who the lab testing partners are, the certifications that they've taken the time and energy and money to go through, their team, go and visit them. Does it seem like a great team? Are they taking all the steps? Are they, what kind of in-house quality team do they have? Is it one person for a 200 employee company, or is it multiple levels of quality from on the line to, label compliance to, checking batch records, etc. So yeah, that's, that can put you in the right direction. Also, FDA warning letters. Ask your facility, have they ever
Hmm.
been audited by the FDA? Co-packers can operate for a very long time without the FDA ever walking through the doors. But if they do, ask them, hey, what kind of findings do they have? Did you receive a warning letter? How did you address those issues that the FDA found? What was your corrective actions? When the FDA came in and said that you're not doing proper final product testing, do you do it now? And I think asking the right questions can really help mitigate, and weed out some of the partners that you might not want to work with.
Yeah, I agree. Especially like, this tactic because yeah, FDA warning letters are public information. And I think, you definitely don't want to work with a manufacturer that got one of these letters. And also, I didn't know that NSF has, basically that list where you can choose. So I think that's a pretty good, place to start. And again, I already mentioned it. A lot of brands, start with one manufacturer, and as I said, especially recently, I keep hearing a lot of complaints about manufacturers. Lead times are too long. Um, we actually have to wait long times for product. To be used in clinical studies as well, and everybody's unhappy about that. And how can brands ensure that their product formulation also remains consistent when working with manufacturers?
Yeah, so I think it's about building a really good product specification sheet. And, I think it's so important for brands to build relationships with ingredient distributors and suppliers, even if they're not directly purchasing the ingredients from them. Being able to request those raw material specification sheets and make sure that they're matching what the manufacturer has. I mean, a lot of people will not even know that there's so many different types of a botanical extract. It can be a 4-to-1, a 10-to-1. It could be a spray dried product with or without maltodextrin in it. It could be, standardized for a specific component. And brands won't always, they might not, they might know or not know, and on their label it just reads, let's just say blueberry extract, but
Mhm.
what does that actually mean? Request the raw material information and have all that info compiled so that when you go in, if you ever need to move a manufacturer, you have all that information, and you
Mhm.
understand who the supplier is, or uh, the exact ingredient specification, so that they can match what you're looking to uh, move over.
Yeah, that makes sense. Know the specs, right? That's very, very important. And Jake, do you have any tips for us for negotiating contracts?
Yeah, so I go back to understanding their challenges, the contract manufacturer, what they deal with, what they go through with your product. Is it a super complex product that has 20 ingredients in it? Is this co-packer spending a ton of time Maybe your uh, product is extremely sticky and it takes a long time to run on the machine, and maybe it's a really difficult product. So I think knowing one, know kind of your weaknesses as your product. Are your volumes lower? Do they have a client that's placing 100,000 bottle runs every single month, and then you're just on that line to kind of fill in the spaces? So first understand what your weaknesses are, but and also understand your there's a lot of really hungry, great manufacturers out there that are smaller, that are really eager to get your business. So don't ever feel that you have to stick to this one co-packer, and just realize where you're coming from in the negotiations, realize where they're coming from, and get creative. Pricing is not the only thing that you can negotiate. You can ask for terms, you can ask for storage of your product if you don't want to
Hmm.
store it in the Amazon warehouse. If you have a ton of inventory that you don't want to send there immediately, you can um, ask to store ingredients there. So, hey, can we order X amount of this ingredient, send it through testing so that it's ready when we're ready to manufacture the product, to help speed up our lead times. So, and also mapping your product. If you know what each ingredient costs in your formula, you have a pretty good idea of what they're charging you on a co-packing rate. So having those strong ingredient connections, being able to map it out on an Excel spreadsheet, and then the more information that you can have, the better for when you go and negotiate with your co-packer. So
Yeah,
your biggest cost drivers are usually always going to be ingredients, unless it's you know,
mhm.
vitamin C tablet that you're just trying to pump out millions of them. But I think that, you know, yeah. So that's that's what I would recommend, is just going in there with as much knowledge and information as possible, and understanding your product cost drivers.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, what you said about that pricing is not the only thing you can negotiate. Especially, I think storage can be a big thing, right? Because storage costs a lot of money. And being able to store ingredients, I think is awesome. Could you also technically negotiate, that now to basically ramp up, right? Now I'm just starting out and now I'm just, manufacturing a couple hundred bottles, and then next month or in the next 3 months, I want to manufacture a couple of thousand ones or co-pack a couple of thousand ones, and then just scale up. Is that something that we could also negotiate?
Sure, volume talks,
Yeah.
definitely with co-packers. I think that, you know, volume's always a great thing to negotiate over. Like, hey, we're going from a couple of thousand bottles to 5 to 10 consistently. These ingredients, as a co-packer runs more of the same ingredient, they have more buying power to also uh, lower the price. Another good question too is, if, let's say, you're running an inositol product, does that co-packer already move metric tons of this ingredient, because their costing might be much more competitive than somebody who, no, we're just buying this ingredient just for you. And so I think understanding what they run a lot of, and being able to negotiate that way as well. Also lead times, I think
Yeah.
lead times can be negotiable as well. If you come in there and, like, hey, I'm sorry, there's no way, if you're at 10 to 12 weeks on our product, like, what can we do to speed that up? Is it an understanding, like, oh, is it a capacity constraint, or is it, you know, a process is, or, don't be afraid to ask the questions of what's really slowing down your co-packer, so that you can make a better informed decision on how to, do you need to leave? Are you outgrowing this co-packer, or is it,
Hmm.
is this the best that you're going to get at with this product that you have?
Well, these are great tips. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
And
of course.
obviously, Jake, you're an expert in manufacturing. I'm an expert in clinical trials. And let's just talk about the intersection of manufacturing and clinical trials. when brands want to make product claims. With the FTC guidelines, they need competent and reliable scientific evidence, and the FTC has specified that this would need to be in the form of a randomized control trial, especially putting now essentially track standards also on supplements. And many people in the industry are not happy with that. And there's a lot of stuff going on right now with citizen petitions and these things, but that's another story. And we work with many brands that come to us with claims from their manufacturer, mostly ingredient claims, especially when they're using patented ingredients. And I think that these claims are a fantastic start. And oftentimes brands are looking for more customized claims than for their respective product. And then they come to us, they conduct a customized clinical study, and then they can make more specific claims that align with their overall brand and brand strategy. And would you agree that this is a good tactic to not only rely on ingredient claims?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, just because the ingredient supplier did a clinical on, X ingredient and X dosage format. I mean, you don't know how the other ingredients that you're speccing into your formulation will interact with what you're taking. Could be a better result, could be worse, I think product claims should be tied to the actual product and not just the ingredients that you're, putting into your product.
And I think this is also a great transition over to Bethany, because Bethany will now talk a little bit, what you can do in terms of story when you actually have these claims. So Bethany, when brands conduct a clinical study, how can they effectively then communicate their new claims?
Yeah, so I think this is so timely because yesterday I was reading a New York Times article titled Gen Z Wants Feminine Care Brands to Just Say Vagina. And the article highlights the Honey Pot company that founded by Beatrice Dixon. They make feminine hygiene products, and the company began third-party clinical testing in 2020. In the article, Beatrice says, we have to be conscientious of the claims that we're making, not just because of regulations, but because customers pay attention. In May 2022, the Honey Pot and Miss Dixon were the target of an onslaught of social media criticism after the company changed the formulation of its washes to give its products longer shelf life without first informing their customers. So they removed the claims that the product was certified organic, and that alarmed customers, which then led Miss Dixon to film a 14-minute Instagram apology. Now, you guys don't want to be in that position. So the takeaway from this is that you have to communicate with your audience. Later, Miss Dixon said, we don't want to just be putting pretty labels on things and then just putting it out into the world. We're a very responsible brand, and whatever we make has to work. So that's a really great statement from her. And I'm sure many of you want that same kind of outlook for your own brand, whether it's existing or you're preparing to launch. But whatever you make has to work. So with that, if you seek clinical testing, whether it's through a consumer perception study or a clinical trial, when you get those results, you have to communicate them with your audience. So that can be in the form of infographics or an illustration with your claims on them. Even just a first step of adding those claims to your product page on the product that you tested, so that when your consumer is doing their research, because they will, they see those claims. And when you start to build up a big following, they're going to notice, they're going to pay attention to the product. They're going to pay attention to the formulas and the labels, especially when you add labels or you make claims that are very driven by what the consumer is already looking for. So in the example with Honey Pot, she made a claim that the product was certified organic, and that drove a lot of consumers to purchase that product because of that claim. So when that claim was dropped, all of a sudden people were questioning, well, why isn't this certified organic anymore? So again, make sure that you are communicating those results, whether that's through just text on your product page, or if you have a graphic designer or you have someone who can maybe put those into an infographic, you can share those on your social media sites, on your homepage, driving people to that specific product that you have. There's so many different ways to communicate your claims with your audience, but you have to do it. You can't just stay silent on it.
Yeah, I think there's also a great example from one of our clients who they conducted a second study with us on the same product, but different focus. And then they announced it on Instagram, but the new study was not on clinicaltrials.gov yet. So clinicaltrials.gov is this governmental website where you can, basically see all of the clinical trials that are happening. And they were only finding the first study they did. And then they were complaining and said, well, but this does not specify that this specific group is included in this study. So they actually announced it a little bit too soon before it was on clinicaltrials.gov. But then, I think a couple of days later, it was there, and then they were like, oh, here's the link, just check out the new link. So again, consumers really notice when something is up, because they definitely do their research. And I already mentioned the FTC and FDA guidelines. And Bethany, how do you think can brand owners and also marketing people navigate the fine line between making compelling claims and then ensuring that they remain compliant with these guidelines?
Yes, so we actually have a really great podcast episode that goes way more into depth on this than I can in this short presentation. But the biggest takeaway from that is to find your risk tolerance. So there's kind of a risk scale with claims where you can make low risk claims or high risk claims. On the high risk scale, there may be something that might catch the eye of the FDA or FTC, and they'll want to see some evidence to back that up. So depending on your risk tolerance, you can determine, well, we want to play it a little bit safer, or hey, maybe we're willing to make something a little bit more bold. Consult with an attorney. That's really the biggest thing too, is that if you're ever in hot water with any regulatory agencies, you're going to want to have an attorney kind of help you sort through that anyway. So you can navigate that fine line a little bit easier if you consult with an attorney beforehand. Now at Citruslabs, all of the claims that we provide are already attorney reviewed. So you have a little bit of that legal assurance before you actually use those claims. And then the third thing that you can do is, unfortunately, the FDA and FTC make these regulations, and they're a little bit kind of based on interpretation, right? They're not always these hard set rules that are really stringent, that everyone has clear guidance on, which is kind of why the citizen petition is happening right now with those 700 warning letters that were sent out. So with that, if you can stay plugged into any industry news, any newsletters, any podcasts, any type of media that you can engage in regularly that will give you those insights, that will really help you stay compliant, especially because those agencies are always changing. They're always releasing new updates that are going to impact your industry, and just staying tied into what those updates are can really help protect your brand.
Agree. Yeah. Industry news, really important. Making sure to, continue getting information about FDA and FTC regulation. And in your opinion, Bethany, what are common marketing mistakes that brands make when presenting product claims, and how do you think they can be avoided?
Yeah, so here are the three top mistakes that I see brands make. One is they don't cite their source. And this has been drilled into us since we started writing research papers in school, right? Like, if you state a fact, you have to cite where you got that fact from.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure you're stating where your clinical research happened, like who conducted your clinical research. Because as we illustrated earlier, your consumers are paying attention and they notice. So really, it's not enough anymore to just say third-party clinical testing. Well, what does that really mean? You know, consumer is always going to have a little bit of skepticism when they approach your brand anyway, just because of the nature of the wellness marketplace. You know, consumers are coming in and they really need that solid proof that your product is going to work for them. So if you've done the work to run a clinical study or a consumer perception study on your product, why not share how you did it, who did it, what the results were? That's really going to help solidify that trust with your consumer. Secondly, engaging in a study but never sharing their results. This one is it's so funny to me. As you know, from a marketing standpoint, I see this as a huge marketing asset to get these claims, to have the scientific data to back up what you want to say about your product, but then not sharing what those results were, not sharing those claims. I see this sometimes with brands, and I'm very excited. You know, I'll go to their website and I'll look through their homepage, their product page, to see if they created a science page, and there's nothing. And I think maybe some brands might be hesitant to share their results if they weren't exactly what they were expecting. For example, if brands don't get some kind of percentage that's like in the high 90s. And, you know, sidebar, we have a great webinar about that next month that you can share. Maybe we can share more detail into why that happens. But you should share your results regardless of what they are, because one, it shows that you are willing to test your product and you believe in the efficacy and you are sharing those results with your consumer. But two, you know, if you have gone to all this trouble to get this data, you might as well share it. And then if you have to reformulate your product to get a better result next time, or do a different study with different parameters, that's fine too. But make sure you're sharing and communicating those results. And then lastly, the mistake that I see sometimes brands making is that they share too much scientific information without helping their audience fully understand what those claims are. So you might think, wow, I'm being fully transparent. I'm sharing everything I have. I'm just going to put a link to my study results in a PDF. And you put that link on your product page and you just wipe your hands clean and say, I'm done, right? Do not do that. It's one thing you can do that. But if you also have to have something else to support that communication that's easier for your audience to understand. So that could be in the form of infographics, you know, even just an image with your top 3 highest claims spelled out so that your audience understands what you tested and what those percentages were that you came back with. You can have those on a dedicated science page where you're sharing a little bit more in depth about your study, but you're not just sharing the full scientific data that comes out. So at Citruslabs, we create a branded visual graphic for you at the end of your study, and we provide that to you as either something you can use immediately and you know, put that on your product page, or something that you can use as a jumping off point to then create your own graphic. But at least you have something that is easier to share with your audience, so you're not just sharing like the full PDF of your scientific results.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so top 3 mistakes summed up is not sharing the source, never sharing results, and third is being too scientific.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, I think, you know, number 1 mistake, especially from also consumer trust, is definitely transparency. I think this is always what we are seeing, right? And Bethany, last question for you. When brands utilize claims correctly, it can really change their growth, right? And what do you think are some strategies to help with business growth, especially when you have these claims, right? It's not just putting these on a website.
Yeah, absolutely. So firstly, integrate your clinical research into your brand story. And, you know, brand storytelling has been around, but it's getting a little bit more traction lately. And people are talking more about, well, how do you tell your brand story? What is your brand story? And that really is going to be about who you are as a brand, what your mission is, who your ideal consumer is, what their problems look like. So if you are engaging in clinical research and you want to, find out what your purpose is for doing that. Are you doing that so that you can be a science forward brand? Well, maybe you do, maybe you don't really want to have a science forward image. Well, maybe you engage in that to build the trust of your consumers. Well, then use that information and say, we are creating something that we believe works, but now we're asking a third party to test it so that we can prove that it actually does work, because we value you as consumers, and we're not just trying to sell something that, we all like to use the term snake oil, but that's kind of what your product could be interpreted as if you're not sharing that clinical research or engaging in it. So integrate it into your brand story, share your reasons why you did the research. Maybe invite your consumers along with you as you're engaging in this research, and really make them feel like they're part of it. Secondly, take your product claims and turn them into as many assets as you can. Use them everywhere. Use them in paid ad campaigns. Update your packaging. We provide a seal that's Citruslabs tested. Put that seal on your packaging on your website. I've already mentioned infographics. Those are really great to convey a lot of complex information in just a visual example. And one thing I would love to see brands do is give your messaging. So give your clinical research results and your claims and kind of what you want to say about your product and your testing. Give that to any influencers you have so that they can highlight this as well. And they're talking about this study that you engaged in. So that can highlight not only the unique selling points of your product, but also your integrity as a brand who engages in clinical research.
Awesome. Yeah, I like the influencer thing, because we know that a lot of brands are also in hot water because influencers just make up some claims, right? And if they actually have the correct information, then this is obviously better, not only for the influencer but also for your brand.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well then, thank you very much for tuning in today. Before we actually go into the Q&A, I just want to let you all know about our next webinar, which is on Tuesday, November 14th, in which we'll talk about why 100% results in your clinical study aren't realistic. And you can register on our website at citruslabs.com/webinar-registration. All right, well then, let's go quickly into some Q&A. So we have one question for Jake. What are your thoughts on listing the ingredients and total weight of a proprietary blend of ingredients versus listing every ingredient amount?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. I think proprietary blends have their space. I guess it depends on. There's a lot of people who utilize proprietary blends to hide the fact that they're putting in smaller amounts of expensive ingredients, and there's a perception that consumers like to see those super long 50 ingredient panels with, you can have 10 milligrams of every single one except on one ingredient, and then that's the majority of your formula. In proprietary blends, what you're supposed to do on the backs of a supplement facts panel is place in descending order by weight. A lot of brands don't do it, whether it's bad advice from their co-packers or, they just didn't know that that's what they had to do. So, me personally, I'm not the biggest fan of proprietary blends. I think that you should, disclose milligram weights of each active in the product, but I do know how that I do see them having their place, whether it's if you have a unique complex of a blend of different ingredients that you don't want anyone to come in be able to create the same exact product and sell it. So there's there's the there's the ups and downs of it. I've heard, consumers get upset not knowing how much of each ingredient is actually in the product, but I've also heard, you know, people like it because it can have these long panels and, oh, it's a plethora of ingredients working together in a synergistic way. So, I think it comes down to what you're claiming on the product. Is that product effective or not? And how you're framing it as a brand, because if you have a proprietary brand that's not full technically traceability of,
Mm-hmm.
it's not full disclosure of what's in your product. So there's a couple ways to look at it. I think they have their place. And I think the biggest concern with consumers is whether or not the product's going to work for what you say it's going to do. So I don't always think they're a bad thing, but I do think that people can take advantage of them.
Yeah. And it always comes down to branding, right? And
Correct.
marketing again.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, then one question was about recommendations for podcasts or newsletters with industry news and updates. Bethany, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our newsletter is pretty good.
I was going to say, shameless plug. Please sign up for a newsletter. We send out 2 a month. And we also have a podcast as well, which we have linked at the end of this presentation. But I was also going to say Nutra Ingredients USA also is a great source. They have a podcast and a newsletter as well.
Great. And then another question is around how to best prepare for product claims as a startup. So obviously, there are 2 ways to go about that. One, would come from the actual ingredient manufacturer. It's typically ingredient claims. And then the other thing is to actually conduct a study on your own products versus just relying on third-party research in terms of existing research that you can get from literature reviews or research from your manufacturer, especially if you have a, again, saying proprietary blend or mix a couple of ingredients together. I think having your own study is really beneficial. And then how do you prepare for that? Obviously, you should know, what claims you want to make, and then a CRO, contract research organization like Citruslabs, can then design the study around the claims you want to make. Another question: what partners other than co-manufacturers or co-packers would we partner with at an early stage of product launch? That's a great question. Jake, do you have any
Yeah,
ideas?
so yeah, fulfillment, I think is very important.
Mhm.
Ironing that out. Do you want to be, doing the packages yourself at your house to start out, and then move over into a, fulfillment center? There's 2 ways you can approach that. So I think fulfillment, I think it's really important to consult with a third party on regulatory.
Mhm.
Um, don't just, I want to say brands are ultimately responsible for what is on their bottles, in their marketing, in their bottles. So you can only co-packers have, they can have a great regulatory team, but their main concern is running machines and making sure that the manufacturing process is GMP and compliant. And, they'll do a once over on the labels. Some teams are stricter than others when it comes to claims. Some of them are pretty open where it's, hey, just put supports
Mhm.
before every claim that you're making on your bottle, and we're okay with labeling it. So, but that's not how you shouldn't just rely on them, because that's your liability to make sure that what's on your bottle is, compliant. So I think consulting with somebody who can review your supplement facts panels, even if your co-packer has a review step in their process. But yeah, so fulfillment, compliance, um, are you doing your marketing and sales on your own? Are you going on YouTube and watching lessons on Google PPC, or are you, wanting to consult with somebody on Upwork to help you at least set things up and realize what's, do some of it yourself with somebody else. What else? Yeah, I think
Yeah,
consultants can save you a lot of time, even on the
yeah,
supply chain. Like, even if I'm more than happy. I always give out free referrals to co-packers of things that we don't do, or if you're looking to source an ingredient, use me as an asset. I'm more than happy to do it all free. The Excel spreadsheet where you can get costs, on all your outline all your costs. So take advantage of, outside consultants. And I know some of them can be very expensive and might not be the right fit for you at that time, but they can also save you, weigh your choices, because they can also save you a ton of time by pointing you in the right direction.
yeah. I would also add the compliance attorneys, marketing team. I think one thing that you should also consider is a designer. You don't have to hire one, right? You can just get one on Upwork, for example. And then I would also add, a research organization that you trust, as well.
Yeah, formulator, anything that you're working with flavors on.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's better to either reach out to, there's Sensient, I'm happy to give recommendations, but there's flavor houses that can help you with your product. And the more work that you do when it comes to taste and formulation will make your life a million times easier when you go to the co-packer. And, a lot of co-packers don't make money formulating. They want to run their machines. So the, more people you can engage with on the formulation side, the better.
All right, and then we have one question around pilot studies. Do you recommend pilot studies before doing full clinical trials when testing products? It actually depends on the life cycle of your product. If it's an entirely new product, then yes, I would definitely recommend a pilot study, because they're just a little cheaper and they can give you your really good ideas what your product can and can't do. And also when you are unsure about which claims you are going after, it can give you a really good idea. Again, which claims you should probably test in a larger clinical study versus not test. But if your product's already on the market for quite some time, you typically have a good idea, in terms of feedback that you have gotten already from your actual users, what your product does and what your product supports, and what these people reporting back to you. And then based on that, we can design a good clinical study to actually nail down the claims you want. All right. And then one question was around testimonials. How can client testimonials be used in marketing without breaking FTC regulations? Bethany, I think this is very interesting because we talked about this with Heather Bustos from Bustos Law Group a couple of times, and it's about not making any claims in these testimonials. So if you have a product, probiotic, and a testimonial makes the claim that this product helps with Crohn's disease, you can't do that, right? Also in a testimonial, even if the testimonial is true, right? You can't highlight that because as a supplement you can't treat or cure anything. And once someone says, well, this product actually helped me with my Crohn's disease, then this is kind of treat and cure. So this is a big no-no. But on the other hand, I think but you should definitely check with an attorney here. If someone just makes that statement without you knowing about it, without you paying anything for it on Instagram, for example, and they just tell people your product name, that this product help with this and that, and then that's you don't have any control over it, but you also can't comment on it. I think that is very important. But yeah, testimonials, same as product claims, right? Can't make any wild claims in terms of treat, cure, or diagnose. Great. Well, I think this is it then. If you are looking to conduct a clinical trial to receive customized claims to supercharge your marketing and grow your business, please reach out to either hello@citruslabs.com. You can also send an email directly to me, Susanne, Susanne @citruslabs.com, and feel free to check out our website, citruslabs.com. And Jake, how can people reach out to you in case they want to learn more about CPG Fusion and get your help?
Sure. My email's jake@cpgfusion.com. And my emails are always open, even if you just want to ask questions or need a referral or, hey, I need a co-packer for this. We have a lot of connections that we're more than happy to give out to anyone.
Great. And Bethany already mentioned, we already also published a podcast episode with Heather Bustos on our podcast From Lab to Label, in which we reveal also a couple of low-risk claims that brands can make, when they have obviously the substantiation. And it's an amazing episode that you should not miss. Obviously, the topic of product claims is interesting to you. And thank you again for tuning in today. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.